Previously on Ted Lasso. Right, let's start! Before many of the jokes land, before we delve into the daily drama of a fish-out-of-water Midwest American football coach, a powerful take-no-prisoners club owner, and the often eccentric and charismatic footballers and employees at AFC Richmond, we get 22 seconds of music. An acoustic guitar strum, and a stadium slowly turning red. It's one of the most quietly beloved title sequences of the streaming era, and most don't know who wrote it. So today, I'm going to fix that. This is the story of the Ted Lasso theme, the two men who built it, the deliberately confused geography baked into every chord, and why a 22-second song became inseparable from its show. Every good origin story needs an inciting incident, and this one is almost too on brand to be true. Jason Sudeikis, the show's star, co-creator and producer, picked up his phone and left his friend Marcus Mumford what Mumford would later describe as the world's longest voice note. Yes, that Marcus Mumford, lead singer of Mumford & Sons, the British folk rock band that dominated festival main stages in the early 2010s. He and Sudeikis had been friends for years, meeting on the set of Saturday Night Live in 2012 when Mumford & Sons made their first SNL appearance. When needing a musical cue for Ted Lasso, Sudeikis asked Mumford for a favour. Would the musician want to score the music for a new Apple TV comedy about an American football coach who takes a job managing an English football club he knows nothing about? But Mumford didn't respond to the voicemail straight away. In fact, it took months for him to get back to Sudeikis. And the story is quite simple. In Mumford's own words, "He loves leaving a long message, that one, but he left me a very long message on my US phone, which I don't keep on me when I'm in the UK. So I actually missed it, and I had it in my phone for a couple of months, and he thought I was just ghosting him. So when I finally picked it up, I called him and was like, 'Sorry, man, but I'd love to talk more about your TV show.' And then I eventually went to set while they were filming in the UK before I started the music, and that's how the story went." So Mumford said yes, but he wasn't going to do it alone. He brought in a collaborator, composer Tom Howell, a British film and television composer whose credits already included work on major studio productions and long-running British series. Mumford would later describe Howell with great affection and a little self-deprecation, calling him one of his grown-up friends who can actually read music, as a joke mind, but also a genuine nod to the fact that Howell brought formal composing chops that complemented Mumford's instincts as a singer-songwriter. Here's what makes their partnership so fitting for this particular project. Ted Lasso, as a show, is built entirely on the tension and eventually the harmony between two cultures that don't quite understand each other yet. An American football coach thrown into English football, surrounded by people who find him quite baffling. The show's entire comedic and emotional engine runs on that transatlantic mismatch, slowly turning into a transatlantic friendship. So when Mumford, an Englishman known and loved by American audiences, teamed up with Howell, another Brit, to write a theme sung in an American coach's voice for an English soccer club, the songwriting team itself became a small, quiet mirror of the show's entire premise. Before we even hit play, the DNA of the show is already there in who was chosen to write it. This wasn't a coincidence either. It was the whole point. When Mumford sat down to talk about the songwriting process afterward, he was remarkably specific about the reference points he and Howell leaned on. He explained that they felt the song needed to sit, in his words, right in the middle of the Atlantic between the UK and the US. So the two of them spent time listening to the Beatles and Jerry and the Pacemakers, along with Creedence Clearwater Revival. The goal, as Mumford put it, was for the song to feel like it existed somewhere between London and Kansas, Kansas being where Ted himself is from. Let's unpack why those three reference points specifically make so much sense. The Beatles and Jerry and the Pacemakers are both, of course, products of Liverpool, the Merseybeat sound of the early 1960s. Bright, jangly guitars, tight vocal harmonies, and infectious uncomplicated warmth. That's your British half of the equation. Creedence Clearwater Revival, on the other hand, is about as American as rock music gets. Swampy, rootsy, built on Americana chord progressions, evoking pickup trucks and open highways, even though the band itself was from California, not the South. That's your American half. Blend those two traditions together, and you get something that doesn't sound purely British or purely American. It sounds like both, simultaneously, which is exactly the trick the show itself pulls off. Now let's get a little technical, because the craftsmanship here really does reward a closer listen. Musically, the theme sits in D major, moving at a tempo of roughly 115 beats per minute, brisk enough to feel purposeful and upbeat, but not so fast that it loses its warmth. The chord progression leans on D, G, A, E minor, and B minor, 5 of the most fundamental folk and pop-friendly chords in the Western songbook. There's nothing exotic or difficult here on paper, and that's precisely the point. These are the chords of campfire sing-alongs and Sunday morning radio, chords that feel instantly familiar whether you grew up on British invasion pop or American heartland rock. That simplicity is a deliberate compositional choice. A theme song has one job above almost all others. It has to feel like home within a few seconds. Every single time you hear it, for potentially dozens of episodes across multiple seasons. Complexity would work against that goal. Familiarity is the feature, not a limitation. Vocally, Mumford's delivery leans warm and open rather than showy. No dramatic changes, no vocal acrobatics. It's built to sound like something one person might actually sing in a locker room, which, as you'll see, is more or less what the lyrics are pretending to be. Here's the detail that turns this from a nice song into a genuinely clever piece of storytelling. The lyrics aren't really about a romantic relationship, or at least not only about one. They're written to sound exactly like the kind of thing Ted himself might say to his players before a big match. A motivational speech dressed up as a love song, or perhaps a love song dressed up as a motivational speech. Reporting on the song's creation has consistently framed it this way. Full of lines you could easily picture Ted saying out loud to his team. Think about the show's core emotional through line for a second. Ted Lasso is not really a show about football tactics. It's a show about believing in people who have stopped believing in themselves, about persistence in the face of failure, about showing up for people even when it costs you something. The lyrics of the theme echo that same register. Themes of not giving up, of proving doubters wrong, of loyalty holding steady even when things get difficult. Whether you hear it as a message to a romantic partner, to a struggling team, or to yourself on a hard day, the sentiment lands the same way, which is exactly why it works as a title sequence song. It essentially mirrors Ted's journey in the show. It's also worth noting the song has 2 lives. What plays over the actual opening credits is a tightly edited fragment, roughly 22 seconds long. But Mumford and Howe wrote and recorded a full version that runs well over 2 minutes and is available as a proper single and included on the show's official season soundtrack. The full song has verses, a bridge, dynamic build, a whole structure of a genuine single, not just a jingle. The producers clearly cared about making something that could stand on its own outside the show, not just function as a sonic logo. We can hear a different arrangement of the theme song in the Christmas episode and the opening to the Coach Beard-centric episode in Season 2, Beard After Hours. The latter takes on Mumford and Howe's theme and is sung by Jeff Tweedy, and it seems to style itself on Beard's depression and heartache as he begins his journey of rediscovery in this episode. Now that's an example of meaningful signal about how seriously the show's creative team treated its music from day one. Plenty of prestige television has memorable opening themes. Far fewer of them are complete enough as songs to release commercially and have people request them on streaming platforms independent of the show itself. Now the timing of the show's creation matters here, and it's a detail easy to miss. Mumford and Howe wrote the theme in January 2020, weeks before the world changed. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, and suddenly finishing and recording the track became a genuine logistical puzzle. Howe was based in Los Angeles, Mumford was back home in England. International travel and studio sessions were, for obvious reasons, off the table. So the two of them had to build the track the way an enormous amount of pandemic-era music got made. Remotely, across time zones, trading files back and forth rather than standing in the same room. It's a small irony. A song explicitly designed to feel like it existed between two continents ended up being produced between two continents out of pure practical necessity rather than artistic intention. Sometimes the most poetic details in a production story aren't planned. They just happen, and you notice it afterward that they actually fit. There's also one more inspirational touchstone worth mentioning. Mumford has also pointed to the BBC's long-running football highlights program Match of the Day as something that fed into his thinking. It's a small detail, but a telling one. It signals that this wasn't written by an outsider doing research on English football culture. It was written by someone who grew up inside that culture, folding a genuinely native reference point into a song aimed at an international, largely American audience, and some Australian. The music doesn't work alone. It's married to a visual sequence that tells its own compressed version of the entire series in under a minute. Ted Lasso, the character, walks into an empty Nelson Road Stadium and takes a seat. As he sits, a wave of colour spreads outward from where he's sitting. The seats around him shifting from a faded, graffitied coloured blue to a clean, vivid red, with the letters of his own name gradually forming across the stands as the colour change ripples outward. That stadium notably doesn't exist. It's a fully computer-generated environment built by the visual effects studio responsible for the show's football sequences, standing in for a real English ground that the production couldn't easily film in throughout the pandemic. The graffiti scrawled across those seats, which eagle-eyed fans have spent considerable time zooming in on and cataloguing, includes jabs at the club and its ownership, callbacks to the show's own running jokes, and the signatures of the main cast layered into the design. The metaphor of the change barely needs explaining, which is exactly why it works so well. One person's presence, one person's optimism, gradually transforms something faded and neglected into something vibrant, spreading outward, seat by seat, until an entire environment has been changed by it. That is almost beat for beat the plot of the entire series, compressed into 20-something seconds of animation, playing underneath a song about refusing to give up and proving people wrong. Music and image are telling the exact same story in two different languages simultaneously. Every single episode, which is a big part of why so few viewers, including me, ever hit skip intro. It's worth stepping back and asking why this particular theme song landed so hard with audiences in an era when television has largely trained viewers to skip openings entirely, or barely have an opening to speak of. Part of it is craft, a genuinely well-built pop song in a familiar key with a singer whose voice already carried real cultural weight for a huge slice of the audience. Part of it is concept, a song deliberately engineered to sit between two cultures for a show that's entirely about two cultures learning to understand one another. And part of it is emotional honesty with lyrics written to double as a coach's pep talk, matched to visuals about one person's stubborn optimism slowly changing everything around him. Put simply, the best television theme songs aren't just a decoration bolted onto the front of an episode. They're thesis statements. They tell you, before a single line of dialogue, exactly what kind of story you're about to watch and how it wants you to feel while watching it. Ted Lasso's theme does that job about as efficiently as any theme song of its era, in 22 seconds, sung by a folk rock frontman over chords simple enough for a beginner guitarist to learn in an afternoon. Marcus Mumford said that writing this song, without his usual full band and without the lyrical density he was used to, taught him something about the importance of melody on its own. That when you strip lyrics away, you're forced to say something through the tune itself. Ted Lasso's theme never strips the lyrics away entirely, but it understands that lesson anyway. Sometimes 22 seconds, 5 chords, and one earnest voice are enough to tell an audience exactly who they're about to spend the next several hours with. Now, if you like this look into the Ted Lasso theme, let me know in the comments below. Chuck a like and maybe consider subscribing. I'm looking forward to what's coming up next, and I hope you are too. Until then, you've been watching and listening to Previously on TV. See you next time. Some of you may be aware that the last essays on this channel featured an actor that appeared in both. To be honest, this just happened to be a complete coincidence. It was only while writing the script for this episode that the connection dawned on me. That actor's name was, of course, the late, great Anthony Head, who starred in Buffy the Vampire Slayer as Sunnydale High librarian and Buffy's watcher, Rupert Giles, as well as the delightfully villainous Rupert Mannion in Ted Lasso. So it would be remiss of me to not acknowledge this legendary actor who sadly passed away at the age of 72 a few months ago. Rest in peace, Anthony.